The false dichotomy, science and faith. Welcome to today's explainer. I am so thrilled you're here because, well, we're tackling a subject that is just incredibly relevant right now. You know, if you're a young, scientifically minded person navigating the modern world, you've probably felt it. That creeping, kind of uncomfortable tension between modern empiricism and spiritual belief. There's this really pervasive idea floating around that you just have to pick a side. Like if you value logic, data, and the scientific method, you somehow have to leave faith at the door. But today, we're going to look closely at the source material that completely dismantles this idea, examining exactly what the texts and the historical data actually say.
Does thinking scientifically mean you can't believe in God? I really want to ask you this directly, because it's the core dilemma so many of us face. It's incredibly common to grow up analyzing the world through the lens of science and suddenly wonder if that intellectual rigor puts you at odds with faith. It can totally feel like a forced choice, right? Like either you're a rational thinker or you're a person of faith. But what if that entire premise is just factually incorrect based on the historical record?
Okay, let's dive into this. A generation of scientists says no. The answer to that dilemma, coming from a whole generation of thinkers and clearly reflected in the source material we're examining today, is a resounding no. This is specifically for those of you who've grown up thinking through science and worry about this conflict. It simply doesn't exist in the way we're often told. The myth that science equals atheism is, well, just that, a myth. And we really don't have to look far into the research to find the proof.
Let's look at the evidence. We're talking about brilliant scientific minds here. Fred Hoyle, Francis Collins, John Lennox. Fred Hoyle, the pioneering astrophysicist who fundamentally changed our understanding of stars. Francis Collins, the physician-geneticist who famously led the Human Genome Project. John Lennox, the esteemed Oxford mathematician. I mean, these aren't just casual observers, right? These are heavy hitters who've spent their entire lives operating at the absolute highest tiers of intellectual and scientific inquiry. They've stared deeply into the mechanics of the universe, complex biology, and advanced mathematics. And what did they find? Did all that rigorous scientific work force them to abandon belief?
Quite the opposite, actually. Real science pointed them toward faith, not away from it. Just take a second to really process that. Deep, authentic, scientific inquiry actually served as a direct signpost to God for these thinkers. They discovered that the deeper they went into the science, whether looking at the unimaginable fine-tuning of the cosmos or the incredibly complex digital code embedded in our DNA, the more the data, the order, and the complexity pointed toward a creator. It's like a giant puzzle. Actually, scratch that. It's more like reading a highly complex instruction manual where the sheer brilliance of the design implies a designer.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive misunderstanding about what faith actually is. We often see the caricature of blind belief, the idea that you just have to turn off your brain and blindly accept things. But when faith is done right, it involves rigorous argumentation. The source material points us to the Islamic scholar Said Nursi and his work, the Risale-i Nur. Throughout his writings, you just don't find a demand for blind acceptance. Instead, he uses highly logical observations of the natural world's order to build a rational case for belief. It is literally some of the most rigorous, structured argumentation you will ever encounter.
What Nursi's approach demonstrates is that structured reasoning, looking deeply at the precise balance of a biological ecosystem or the immutable laws of physics, doesn't pull you away from spiritual truth. In fact, this deeply intellectual, rigorous argumentation leads straight to the oneness of God. The text argues that you can bring your entire intellect, your capacity for logic, and your demand for evidence to the table, and those very tools will guide you to a profound spiritual understanding. Logic and faith, according to this framework, are perfectly aligned.
Now, let's move to a fascinating historical twist found in the texts. 1,400. What does this represent? Well, it's easy to miss this fact, but 1,400 years ago, the Qur'an explicitly instructed humanity to do something very specific. It told people to observe, to think, and to research. Over a millennium before the scientific revolution as we know it, the mandate to carefully study the mechanics of the universe was already put in place. This ancient mandate isn't a contradiction of science. The scientific spirit, showing up centuries early. The drive to observe the natural world, to study the stars, and to research the universe around us is deeply embedded in this ancient text. It was the spark that eventually fueled centuries of astronomical, mathematical, and medical advancements across the historical world. It's not an afterthought or some modern adjustment to keep up with the times. No, it is foundational to the text itself.
So the crucial point is this. Think about your telescope, the ultimate symbol of human curiosity, scientific observation, and empirical research. And then think about your prayer mat, the symbol of spiritual devotion, submission, and faith. For so long, society has told you that these two things belong in completely different rooms, or even entirely different lives. But as the source material reveals, you don't have to choose. You absolutely do not have to choose between your telescope and your prayer mat. The very people who built modern science often embraced both intellectual discovery and spiritual devotion, without a single shred of conflict. They understood that studying the creation is a rigorous, deeply logical way to understand the Creator. You can be entirely committed to the scientific method and entirely committed to your faith at the exact same time.
I want to leave you with this final thought to carry with you today from our explainer. If the universe is a meticulously written book waiting to be researched, as so many brilliant scientific minds and rigorous logical arguments suggest, what will your telescope reveal about its author? Keep observing, keep researching, and never be afraid to follow the truth wherever it points.